Good day, everyone. This lecture will discuss the issue of a final payment certificate based on the final account that the contractor and the employer has signed off. So you completed your final account, and now based on the final account, we need to issue a final payment certificate. What is important is that we have to take note of the JBCC clause 25.15, which stipulates that you will only be in a position to issue a final payment certificate once a certificate of final completion has been issued by the principal agent. If not, then you are not in a position to or allowed to issue a final payment certificate. Just take note of clause 25.15. Now let's look at this final payment certificates, which includes the payment certificates itself, the recovery statement, a notice to the electrical contractor, in this case, the only nominated subcontract, and then the payment advice to the nominated subcontract. So this is the final payment certificate. We issued certificate number 6 at practical completion, and now we in a position to issue the final payment certificate number 7. So if we look at the payment certificate, we are dealing with certificate number 7, which is now indicated as the final payment certificate. All the details are still the same, no change to that. Certificate number 7 was dated on the 25th of August. We also issued the certificate on the same day, and the due date for payment is on the 8th of September. Good. If we look at column A, and column A, we all know by now, remains the same, no changes to that column from certificate 1 right up till the final payment certificate. It refers to the contract sum, which is now your tender figure. So we all know by now that as from certificate 1 right up till the final payment certificate, the figures, the values in column A remains the same. Column B reflects the contract value. Now that's the variable contract of the variable column. Obviously, during the construction period, you need to advise the client where are we standing with the current financial position, and also reflect on the anticipated final value, which is the contract value. Now, because we are dealing now with certificate number 7, which is based on your final account, therefore, the values in the column B should reflect the final account values. Very important. Up till certificate number 6, we based our values in column B based on a draft final account, which is variable. It can change. But now we're dealing with the final certificate, so therefore column B's value should be final, and that is now based on the final account. Now, if we look at the actual value for certificate number 7, those figures, the 1.463, you'll get that from your final account summary page. So, if we add up the two figures, the 1.44 million plus the 18,000, that should give me that figure of 1.46. Or in a nutshell, we can establish, because the net contract sum, that remains the same in column A and B, so that remains the same, no change to that. The variable one is the value attached to the contract instructions, the adjustments to the contract value. And in this case, there was a net extra. Now, how did we get to that? We take the final net figure less the original contract sum, and that will give me my difference here. In this case, it's an extra of 18,000 odd rand. So if we add up the two figures, that must give me my net final value. So this 1.463 million, you'll find that figure on the final account summary page. We also did final escalation, so that 30,377, that's your final escalation, which is the main contractor plus the nominated subcontractor, the electrical contractor. If you add up those two figures, that will give you 30,000 rand. So all three of them in the column B, C, and D remains the same. Now again, if we look at the amount here of 1.493, that's also a figure just before the VAT on your final account summary page. You'll also find that figure of 1.493. So basically the figures that we are talking about, the 1.46 and the 30,000 rand and the 1.49, the total certified, you'll find that on the final account summary page. Remember the 30,000, that was the final escalation calculation which we did previously. The previous amount certified, that's the net amount that was certified for certificate number 6. So that gives me now an amount due to the contractor for certificate number 7 of 104,773 rand. So we need to pay the contractor this amount plus the VAT, the 15% VAT. And what you'll note that there's, in this case, compensatory interest. Now, there will always be compensatory interest on your final payment, because that is now after practical completion. Now, if you go to the JBCC document, the principal agreement, under definitions, you can find the definition or the explanation for compensatory interest. That is the interest as from practical completion up to payment of the final certificate. And that's a straight calculation. There is no almost a penalty attached to that. It's a straight calculation. We will discuss this calculation. There's no penalty as we calculated for default interest. Remember, default interest, someone is in default. In other words, basically in our case, we discussed and determined default where the employer was late in paying the contractor. So therefore, the employer was in default, so the contractor is entitled for default interest. The contractor argued now and said, well, you should have paid me 104,000 rand at practical completion because I've handed over a building 100% complete. I didn't receive 100% of payment. I've waited now a couple of days or a number of days for this 104,000, but I want interest on this. And that is what we refer to as compensatory interest. Now let's just see, how did we determine that 1,720 rand? If we look at the amount that is due to the contractor, the 104,000 rand, the repo rate as given as 5.5%, times it by the number of days. Now, the number of days, as we've said, it's the number of days as from practical completion, which was on the 23rd, or completion on the 22nd. So we'll start from the 23rd of May, and there's 9 days left in May. We are issuing a certificate number 7 on the 25th of August, and we allow an additional 14 days to pay. So the contractor now claims interest on 109 days. And note, there's no add-on 6% as we did for the default interest. So in this case, it's just a straight calculation, 5.5% over 109 days, based on that outstanding amount due to the contractor of 104,000, and that gives me the figure of 1,720 and 87 cents. So that is the interest, compensatory interest, that the contractor is entitled. So if we go back to my payment certificate, we add the compensatory interest, and remember what I've said, with a final payment certificate, you will always have compensatory interest. And in this case, if we add the 104 plus the 104,773 Rand, plus the tax on that, plus the compensatory interest, no other additions, that gives me then a total value of the check to the contractor of 122,210 odd Rand. And that we indicate that the percentage, as well as we've issue a final completion. And remember now, as I said, clause 25.15 stipulates you're only going to issue the certificate if we've received a final certificate of final completion issued by the principal agent. So that settles the JBC's payment certificate. The recovery statement, in this case, it's for certificate number 7. There was no other values except the compensatory interest that we've calculated. That's for your main contractor. The notification for payment to the nominated subcontractor, also certificate 7 final, that relates to your electrical contractor. In this case, also certificate number 7, due date for payment, or the date of issue of certificate number 7 rather. The same principle apply here if we look at the column A, B, C, and D. Column A, as we've said, that's the contract sum. In this case, it's for the main contractor, and there's your original contract sum. There was an estimation for escalation at that point. Column B reflects now the final account value for the electrical contractor. In this case, once again, that was the final contract value for the electrical contract. So these two figures, the 88,000 plus the 13,754, should add up to that figure. If you go to your final account, one of the final account contract instructions, the adjustment for provisional sums, we omit what we've measured and we add the new. And this figure was supplied by the electrical engineer, excluding that. So to complete column B, it's the final value, the 101,754, less the 88,000 will give you this difference of 13,000. So in this case, there was also an extra on the contract due to adjustments in the form of contract instructions. We also did the final escalation on the electrical, and you've got that figure of 2,952 Rand. So that is also the final escalation on the nominated subcontract. And then your tax, and then giving you the final value for electrical installation. Now column C and D reflects the actual payment. So we've got the final value for electrical installation. We add the VAT, the escalation, that gives me then a figure of 104,707. Less the payment for the electrical contractor up to certificate number 6. Now this figure includes the work done plus the escalation. Just make sure that you get to this 90,000 Rand. That is now work done. If you look at certificate number 6, it's work done plus escalation. Add the VAT, 15%. So the electrical contractor is due for payment. It can expect a check to the value of 16,930. And obviously the the 115.1% completion rate at the final completion, which is also ticked off the box. Remember, we only fill in the percentages if it's a variable construction guarantee. And then lastly, the advice, payment for advice, that is basically almost a repeat of the notification. All the values are identical, so there's no need for further discussion. It's almost a duplication of the notification for payment to the electrical contractor. I'm sure when we reach this point of the contract, you'll be happy then to conclude the project. And remember, this is now the final payment certificate. And what happened after this, let's hope the client will pay on time. If the client doesn't pay on time, then it becomes a matter between the contractor and the employer, because we need to draw a line, and that is now 14 days after the due payment. Good. I hope you've learned some good information during this three-part session on final accounts and the issue of a final payment certificate. We'll see each other again next time. See you for now.